Our next guest joined us about a month and a half ago on the 50th anniversary of what became known as Boston's busing crisis. There was too much we did not get to discuss while they were here. They were kind enough to agree to return to continue our discussion about building the best schools for the city and community's kids, and now to discuss how the work they've dedicated their lives to will be affected, if it will be, by the changes on the national level of 9 days ago. With us in person is Kim Janey, our city's first black, first female mayor. She's currently president and CEO of Economic Mobility Pathways. Mayor Janey, it's great to see you again.
Thank you.
We're also joined in person by the distinguished professor of public policy and urban affairs at Northeastern. He also directs the university's Kitty and Michael Dukakis Center for Urban and Regional Policy. And of course, you recognize him from a moment of incredible violence immortalized in the Pulitzer Prize-winning image, The Soiling of Old Glory. Ted Landsmark, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here. And in a couple of minutes, we'll be joined on Zoom by Michael Curry, former head of the Boston NAACP, current board member of the National NAACP, and CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers. Again, that'll be in a couple of minutes. Mayor and Ted, it's great to see you.
It's great to be here.
Great to be here.
Well, let's start with you, Mayor Kim Janey. Tell us if, as Jim just mentioned, the election, re-election really of Trump, does that impact what you're doing here locally? Are there going to be effects?
You know, I certainly think so. Our elections are important. There is truth in the fact that the closer the election is to you, the more you're impacted. But we can't ignore the rhetoric coming out of this candidate-elect and what they plan on doing and how that is impacting folks locally on the ground. I serve at Empath, a number of women and children who are immigrants, who are feeling fearful of what is happening next. What does this mean for them in terms of mass deportations, in terms of drying up of resources that could help them climb the economic ladder and be to be in a place where they can contribute and make sure that themselves and their families are good. And so they're worried for sure of what happens next.
How do you address their fear if you and your coworker?
Well,
what do you
we
say?
first and foremost are committing ourselves to this work and letting them know that they are safe when they are with us, that we are here to continue to help them on their journey. And that all of us deserve this opportunity to live out the American dream in this nation. This nation has a lot of resources, and certainly I'm trying to lean in on the hope side of things, but it is really worrisome. Our families are feeling it, our staff. We have to worry and wonder about resources coming down the pike, what kind of legislation will be there to either help or hurt our families.
You know, Ted Landsmark, you obviously work in the education infrastructure. We'll get to the public schools in a couple of minutes when Michael Curry joins us, but we've already heard that this next president wants to eliminate the Department of Education. He has made it clear that higher education institutions that continue to commit to issues like DEI have potential to suffer a loss of whatever federal funding they receive, and I believe most prominent universities do receive it. What's the likely impact in your estimation on the world in which you work?
Well, there's no question but that students are very apprehensive about how their careers are going to shape up at this point. Many of the fields that students have thought about going into that relate to matters of urban planning, social justice, racial equality, gender equality, are being cut back very significantly. And we're also seeing major cuts in infrastructure spending that will affect matters of resilience and sustainability and how we go about developing along our coastline. So students who entered our programs as recently as 2 or 3 years ago thinking that they had fairly clear career paths into many of these fields that are being cut back now wonder exactly what's going to happen to them.
You know, let's move from students to the people in charge. There was a term that I'd never heard of until I read it in Brian McGrory's column after Jeff Bezos killed the endorsement of Kamala Harris in his paper, The Washington Post. Anticipatory obedience that was actually crafted in 2017 by a professor at Yale. The notion being that powerful people are bending at the knee of the man who might be the next president of the United States out of fear. Now he has become the next president of the United States. Are leaders in higher education who, it seems to me in many cases, were cowed by the efforts of the Elise Stefanik's and others in Congress during those hearings, what's your expectation of how they react to a Trump presidency?
I think there's certainly been concern at the level of our public universities, where legislatures, which have tilted very much to the right, are now cutting back on programs that relate to inclusiveness and DEI. And I think that a number of universities around the country are taking pressure from alumni and from conservative lawmakers who don't like to see the kind of progressive discussion that goes on within universities taking place.
When you hear things like Harvard across the river here talking about staying neutral on all but core issues, I don't even know what that means, except we won't take a position on anything that's going to upset a rich alum. What's your reaction to that kind of thing? And they're not alone, by the way.
I don't think there is neutrality. I think that the classroom should serve as common ground and a neutral place where people can have safe dialogue. We often emphasize in our classes that the classroom is probably the safest place for students to come together to discuss potentially divisive issues. And it's not always easy to get students to speak out on some of the things they believe in.
Are you going to change anything you say?
No.
I didn't think so.
Kim Janey, if you believe what we've read and heard since the election, the big issues for people that supported President-elect Trump were, bread and butter issues, the price of eggs, the cost of groceries, cost of a living, and immigration. And even among Latino voters, and I think a lot of people wrongly assumed that if you just got here 20 years ago or 10 years ago, you would be much more sympathetic to the people coming across the border now, fleeing these horrible conditions. But that seemed not to work, and that when people complain that the Democrats forgot about the working class, that the thesis is that it is the working class towns that absorb more of the migrants coming here. Remember, the recreation center in Roxbury got shut down for a while, the Melanie cast one for the migrant families and stuff. So is it that the so-called elites didn't realize the issues that people in communities most affected?
Look, I'll say this. The economy is always a top issue.
Yeah.
Issues around your pocketbook always matter. We've learned that in our elections always. And that is an issue that impacts all of us. And I think somehow we've allowed ourselves to say that a woman's issue is about reproductive health care and not the economy. And that is false, completely false. All of that being said, I do find it hard to reconcile the fact that because some individuals, the price of gas has gone up for someone, that they could then still embrace such an administration, one who has been very clear about his stance against women and reproductive health care, very clear about his stance against immigrants, against so many of these groups who, for whatever reason, he was able to grow his share of votes with some of these votes, and that we would put a convicted felon in the White House, someone who has promised that he would undo everything he could about our Constitution and our democracy, is frightening. And we would do that because I'm paying too much for gas. It's hard to reconcile that.
But we did, right? A majority of
but
people
is that
did.
the reason?
I don't know.
Well, what is the reason?
I don't know the reason.
Do you know
but
the reason?
I would speculate it goes deeper than the price of gas and the price of eggs.
How about Ted Landsmark, Mr. Public Policy at Northeastern? Do you know the reason?
I think that the radical right has been organizing at the ground level for at least 20 years. They've been organizing around school board elections and tax board elections and around the selection of judges and the like. And they have, to a certain extent, taken over many of the elements of the democratic infrastructure that exists, that holds the country together. And they've done that across the country, and they've done it very successfully. And I think that if progressives want to change that, we need to recognize that that change is not going to take place in 6 months, but it's going to take place because people organize and get out to vote.
But, you know, I have to say, we've heard for years, I subscribe to your notion, by the way, even though I'm going to criticize it in a second. We have heard for years people sitting in that chair saying they're better at strategy. I mean, the Federalist Society, for example, and their laser-like focus on getting people on the Supreme Court of the United States. Why doesn't the other side, the progressive side of the ledger, have a similar sort of thing? Margaret Marshall was sitting there, the former Chief Justice of the SJC, 2 days ago, and we asked her if she believed, for example, an expansion of the Supreme Court. I don't know about you, I never talked to her. I was shocked when she said, without blinking, of course I do. And she went on to say, and I have no idea why President Biden, who I think she admires, didn't embrace that immediately. So I guess the question to you, Ted Landsmark, is why is the right so much better at organizing and strategic decision making than, I don't even want to call it the left, whatever it is, the progressive side of the debate in America? Why are they so much better at this?
I think it's because they've narrowed the issues that they're prepared to go after. They have a limited discourse to just the economy or just women's rights or just racial justice, where the left to a large extent has taken on a much broader panoply of issues to address. And as a result, the right has been able to elect people to high office who have a shared agenda.
Yeah. And
You
I don't think
subscribe
we
to that?
can.
Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
don't think we can ignore. I agree with all of that, and I don't think we can ignore the politics of fear. So what the right has been very successful in doing, in addition to all of those things, is tapping into people's fears. And sadly, the fears are outweighing the hopes, and people are motivated seemingly by fear of what might happen versus a hope for a better future.
But Mayor Janey, who talked more about fear of the opposition than Vice President Harris?
She did, but that's not the same kind of fear of saying to a group of individuals, you are being replaced by all of these other groups, and therefore we've got to take our country back. That is the kind of fear that is out there that we did not necessarily hear from those candidates, but really on the ground as they are doing their canvassing and door knocking. That is the kind of fear that was out there.
We're talking, that's the voice of former Mayor Kim Janey. She's now President and CEO of Economic Mobility Pathways. The other person with us is Ted Landsmark from Northeastern and the Dukakis Center, and we expect to be joined imminently by Michael Curry from the NAACP and the League of Community Health Centers.
You know, the replacement thing was a big thing, particularly among white Americans who may be concerned about being replaced by people of color. But the thing I don't get, like I mentioned before about the Latinos, I thought a lot of the racism was a lot about racism on the southern border. But then when you have, and Mexicans and Guatemalans and people from Venezuela and people who are also Latinos, so upset about the southern border, it's not just, it's partly racism, but it's not just racism.
No, it's a caste system. And
Yeah.
so we have perfected that in this nation. We have perfected that even if we view ourselves as being kind of lower in the economic rungs, at least we're not like those folks.
Yeah.
And that's what we are seeing, sadly, with lots of different groups.
I want to talk, can we talk, in a second, we promised to talk about schools, and I want to do that, public schools. Before we do, as I was just looking at you, and you're probably so sick of this, and I apologize. It's really hard to talk to you and not have that image conjured up. I mean, you know that to be true, and I'm sorry because you've done such
tough.
incredible work in your life that I admire greatly. But I could see that exact same thing happening tomorrow. The exact same image, the same flagpole, the same black man or woman on a plaza of some city hall in some city in this country.
I think you're right.
Well, that's one vote. How about you?
Yeah, I have students who come to me who don't know about the photograph and see it and immediately express apprehension that could happen to them in almost any American city.
And what do you say to them when they say that to you?
I tell them that things like that do in fact happen, although generally not with a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer next to
Standing
them.
by. Exactly right. Stanley Foreman, yes, exactly.
Yeah, he was a great photographer. So last time we talked to you, we were talking about the 50th anniversary from busing. And Mary Janey, you experienced busing. Michael Curry, who's standing us up here, he's on his way at some point.
He's at some conference.
He was also a kid that was bused. And you think, okay, 50 years later, you're reading stories in the paper about still trying to get the buses to the schools on time. You read that really heartbreaking story about the kids all dressed up in their football uniforms. I think it was East Boston High. They were going to go play. I forget, was it the O'Brien they were going to go play? I think it was the O'Brien. I don't remember. Anyway, they're all ready to go, and the bus doesn't show up. So, and we spend a lot of money, right, in Boston on busing. So it kind of made you think, wow, I mean, what are we doing?
Right, and as we talked last time, Marjorie, we have seen the transportation line item go up over the years, and at the same time, we have seen the number of students decrease who are using our buses, and very little of what is left in that budget is for busing kids by choice. Most of that is mandated by state law. And so I know it is a line item that people want to kind of target and put a bullseye on, but unless you are willing to go deeper and try to change some of these laws,
this is like special ed kids that may be going to Needham or something.
And we've made a commitment to busing students with disabilities, and I think that's a value that we should maintain, but we have to recognize if we're going to maintain that value, there's a price associated with that. Very little of this money is being, but remember, they took the middle school kids off these buses. The high school kids weren't on the buses to begin with, and then with the home-based assignment plan, more and more kids are going to school closer to their homes.
But you said last time, I remember, you had the final word in the last discussion, which was cut short before we got to solutions, which is one of the primary reasons we wanted all three of you back, is when one of your colleagues, either Ted or Michael Curry, said neighborhood schools, you were quick to jump in and say high-quality neighborhood schools.
Absolutely.
That neighborhood schools alone are not enough.
Absolutely, and if we're building high-quality neighborhood schools, we have a better chance of getting folks to choose schools closer to home. We already know that parents want the best for their kids and that they're willing to put their kids on buses long distances like through METCO to get that quality, that they're willing to send their kids away to boarding school to get that quality. So rather than just figuring out how kids are transported to school, the missed opportunity has always been how are we improving that quality in the school, and that proximity is not a proxy for parent engagement. That's where we left off. The thinking that you were saying, Marjorie, is, well, if we just have the school, all of the parents will bring cupcakes. Well, that is not our reality today. It was never my reality as a woman of color that we would have the luxury of bringing cupcakes to school when we have to work. And there's a lot more that has to happen in that school building with that staff to ensure that the school is welcoming and inviting families in and treating them as partners in the education of their children. That can make a difference.
So Ted Landsmark, you've been nodding through most of what Kim Janey has said in the last couple of minutes here. Flesh it out a little bit. What should be happening in these schools 50 years after busing?
Well, first of all, school buildings need to be seen as community resources. And not only as places where education of young people takes place. They need to be seen as points of access for healthcare, for employment, for the arts, for community building, for a range of other services, because they're centrally located, they're safe spaces, they often have parking available, and they're perceived by communities to be real assets. And I think that if we reconceptualize the way we think of the school building, we fundamentally change the culture within the community.
You know, that idea, I don't mean this in a critical, that's so obvious and makes so much sense to me that the natural question is, so why aren't we doing something that makes so much sense? That isn't that hard a question, Ted. I don't think it is. Why are we not doing, we'll get the mayor involved in a second. Why are we not doing that?
Yeah, I'd like to hear her
Well, she goes first. Okay,
you better ask the current mayor. You better ask her.
Well, we're asking the former mayor.
I would say that in Boston, there is no shortage of dedicated nonprofits that want to support community groups, leaders, civic leaders, et cetera. those folks don't always agree on what is the best use. To keep a school building open after hours, it is an asset that should be utilized, but there is a cost to that. We have to recognize to keep that building open, you have to hire janitorial staff, you have to have security and the like. And this is just to have a PTA meeting, a parent meeting. And so if you're really opening up to community after hours, that's a whole nother thing. And what I hear you saying is not just after hours, Ted, but throughout the day. And how are we bringing in our health services? How are we making sure that our children who may not have access and opportunity outside of the school for some of these resources, that we're providing them there during
Well,
the school
I think
day?
I can sort of answer your question about resources. I don't remember when you were mayor if this issue had to be confronted within that time frame, but I know that Mayor Wu is confronting it. The way you save money is you consolidate schools, and it seems to me as a mayor of a major American city, there's nothing more difficult than to close a school
I
and
would
convince
agree.
a community. So what do you do about that?
I would agree. I think this city has to face a really hard reality. And I think what will be important is to lay out a process by which you are engaging lots of folks early on at the beginning of a process, not to come out with half-baked plans and have people react and go crazy, but how can we really together say, these are the hard realities that we're facing. We have buildings that are old and that are falling apart. We have a shrinking student population, and we have limited resources. And so we have to make some tough decisions. My understanding is that that football was kicked down, or that can was kicked down the road a little further. So I'm not sure when we're going to start that process, but I think we are going to have to face that tough reality.
Yeah, consolidation is a 2 to 3 year process that involves making enough time for parents to be able to plan for what will happen to their kids 2 or 3 years away. And it's very difficult for public officials to sell the concept that something is not going to happen immediately, or at least within the term of their elected service. So it requires a comprehensive way of looking and engaging parents over a multi-year process.
Has
It
anybody
is.
done
It's like-
success? Any mayor in recent American history that you're familiar with, Ted Landsmark, done exactly what you're suggesting in a major American city?
I can't think of one offhand.
I mean,
It's politically very difficult.
it is very
Yeah.
difficult.
What Ted said, though, is important. The benefits of such moves usually are down the road. And so the parents who are experiencing the disruption, the kids that are experiencing that disruption, will never see that benefit. And so you have to convince people that it's important to plant a tree that will provide shade for people who are yet to come. It's really tough.
We're talking to former Mayor Kim Janey and Ted Landsmark from Northeastern.
You know, Kim Janey, you mentioned when we first started the fear and the nervousness with the moms and the children and the people that you were dealing with who've recently arrived here. Where are they hanging out? Where are they going? How are they planning their next few weeks ahead?
You know, so our families at Empath are working hard to climb the economic ladder and to put in place all of the steps needed to do that. So that might be completing a certificate program or a degree. That might be making sure that they are cleaning up their credit scores. Perhaps they are applying for new jobs and really trying to, bring up their incomes. Our families at Empath desperately want to work, and so it's important to shut down the lies that we see coming out of different camps who want to describe folks as being lazy or being a drain.
Yep.
These are folks who are helping to stimulate our economy. And not all of the folks that we serve are immigrants. Many of these families we are serving are American born families, and all of us deserve this opportunity. So they are working hard despite the rhetoric that is coming down, and we are there to try to support them as they live out their.
And you can't help think in Boston, which has become so ridiculously expensive to live in, that what is the number you have to be making $70,000 to afford a 1-bedroom or something in Boston? So it must be incredibly frustrating.
And I think it's more than that.
It could be more than that. It could be a lot more than that. But it's got to be incredibly frustrating to try to live in a decent place.
It is. It is tough in our region, and so part of what we have to do come together is to make sure we're making our city more affordable as we continue to grow. We need to make sure that this city continues to be a vibrant, world-class city that does not displace its residents, that people can find opportunity right here within our city, and that they can raise their families. You're right to point out all of these challenges, but I think, using this election as that tool and inspiration we need to kind of tackle some of these tougher issues for our families is really important. That's the work that we're doing at Economic Mobility Pathways. Doesn't matter who's in office, we are going to help our families live out the American dream.
So I'm going to let you two make the following program decision, Ted Landsmark and Mayor Janey. The tardy Michael Curry has appeared with 1 minute and 26 seconds left.
We can give him the final word.
Do we
Okay.
allow him?
We're going to give it to you, Mike.
Yeah.
Michael Curry, head of the League of Community Health Centers on the National Board of the NAACP. Michael, welcome. We know you had a conflict and we appreciate it.
Yeah.
The question that we want to address to you is, of all the things that's happening on the federal level, it seems to me the easiest one to connect the dots with is from RFK Jr.'s potential, quote, leadership of health and human services and public health, and the work that somebody like you and the hundreds, thousands of people who work with you at the League of Community Health Centers. How at risk is what you do because of that decision by the incoming president?
Yeah, I think I am right now in North Carolina speaking to a group of medical students from across the country, and I'm the keynote speaker for this group. And I can tell you the sentiment of the professors, the faculty, and the students in this room is fear. Because they know that science matters, and that this expected nominee, doesn't believe in science. And that not believing in science, as we learned from cholera and polio and COVID, right? Science matters and saves lives, and hundreds of millions of lives have been saved. And now we have a person who doesn't believe in science. He's going from his gut, not from his research, not from the data. So I am super terrified, because that's what we got when we voted. We got a denial of science, and now this person is likely to run many of the most critical agencies in health and human services, and the FDA and others. So I say that having joined late, and I apologize.
Oh, it's fine. We understand.
We got to be super vigilant now, as I heard Kim and others, and Kim would normally say this now. If you were asleep before and you were waking up, now you need to be an insomniac, because now you got to pay attention every day, every night, to make sure that your family's not impacted by bad policy, healthcare policy.
Michael, do we have a second?
Yeah, we do.
Just quickly, one of the things that RFK is most famous for, RFK Jr., I should say, is being a vaccine skeptic, or if not actually stopping people walking around with babies and telling them not to get their kids vaccinated. So what would that mean? Could that mean a shortage of actual vaccines, or what are we talking about here?
Yeah, the implication is this. Of course, I'm here with researchers, right? So my presentation is clinical trials at HBCU. It's Kim, it's Livingstone College. And I'm here with Dr. Davis and his future STEM participants. And I think the folks here, and I'll be walking out of this and going back to chop it up with them, as we say, about research and science, is that we need the pharmaceutical life sciences to invest in this research. We need for there to be some benefit for them to research and invest in this, so that if we identify a solution, a life-saving innovation, that there's a market for it and people will take it, so that we save lives. There is going to be, it's not a matter of if there's going to be another pandemic, there will. And some things won't be worldwide, they'll be more isolated. And the reality is that we need that research now. We need the investments in that research now. We don't want to be caught flat-footed with emergency use authorizations like we did before. We want to have the investment, and we want to have diverse clinical trials and research. Again, to your question, Marjorie, the implications are more people die, and as we know about health inequity, the people who are more likely to die are the people closer to the pain. They're poor, they're unhoused, they're unbanked. And they're essential workers, and they got, Kim, what they call black jobs, which Trump sarcastically used, but unfortunately we relegated black and brown people to bus drivers and sanitation workers and essential workers and nurses, which he tripped into that when he said it intentionally. But the reality is we need them healthy, and we need to make sure they have medications and they can go on to medical school and law school and be the brilliant folks that I'm meeting in the room today.
Can I just say, Michael, thank you. I'm glad you got here, and we hope all three of you will continue to return as a group. We really benefit from this. But I want to say, rather than leaving it with RFK Jr., when Chief Justice Marshall was here the other day, she said the single most inspirational moment in her life was in Cape Town in 1966 when she invited Robert Kennedy to come speak at a pretty horrible time in South Africa's history. And we played a little bit. Listen to the speech. Google the speech of RFK then for those who feel hope deprived, and maybe that helps you do the kinds of things all three of these people continue to do. We really appreciate your time today, all three of you.